Well, joining us is Gary Jenkins. He's head of credit research at Evolution Securities. Gary, thank you so much for coming in. It hasn't gotten any better at all, actually. The situation, I guess, is just as uncertain now as it was, well, the previous week and the week before that and the week before that.
Yeah, well, in a way, the ECB and the other central banks coming in saying they're going to provide liquidity, it did give a short-term boost to the market, but the fact is that I think most investors always thought they would provide liquidity if it was needed anyway. There's no real doubts about the central bank's commitment when it comes to making sure that a major bank doesn't go bust just because of liquidity. The problem is that you've got Greece in the background and then the knock-on impact of Greece on everything else, and that's the major problem.
But what do you make? I mean, there are always rumours that some of the banks can't fund themselves in dollar terms, some of the French banks, and this is, you know, then denied or declined by the press officers of those banks. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of pressure on stocks in banking sector every day almost. Does this need to come to a head, or are we just going to limber along like this for the next year or so?
Well, the sovereign crisis hasn't come to a head and they're kicking that can down the road continually. I don't really see why they're going to take dramatic action on the banks. At some stage they're going to have to do something, clearly, and whether that's using the EFSF to recapitalise banks or whatever it is, they're going to have to do something. But at the moment they can provide liquidity. It's the one thing they can do, and if the banks can't get it via their own normal mechanisms, then the ECB can provide it to them.
Okay, so they have the liquidity, but, you know, to have more substance in terms of the longer-term resolution, will we have to wait October? There was this interesting proposal by Treasury Secretary Geithner talking about having a European-type TARP. Yeah. Would the ECB ever go for something like that? Well,
Geithner's recommendation didn't seem to go down too well with the European finance ministers, funny enough. American coming over to Europe saying you've got a debt problem. So, you know, I think it's going to probably be put off for a bit. I think that they will only take the action when they really need to. And I think what they'll probably do is look at what's happening with the sovereigns, look at what's happening with Greece and say, OK, if that goes, what do we need to protect? We need to protect the banking system, we need to protect Italy and Spain, and they're going to have to get those ducks in a row and make sure that everything is protected at the time that Greece actually goes.
Are a lot of the G7 countries going to lose their AAA credit rating? You know, Italy is under review at the moment. We may get something or we may not in the next couple of weeks. How concerned are you about Italy?
Well, I'm not concerned about Moody's rating for Italy because they're already, you know, S&P's already 2 notches lower. So ratings are still technically important, but they're kind of irrelevant to whether you can borrow in the market. Let's not forget that if it wasn't for the ECB stepping in, Italy and Spain would probably not be able to borrow in the market at all. So they're actually being bailed out to some degree anyway.
But I guess it exacerbates investors' fear, and yeah. Anything that we do, even if we hear from Moody's and it's pretty much, you know, non-relevant for the professionals, I get investors may still be spooked because the markets are so jittery at the moment.
It's negative sentiment, no doubt about that, when you get a downgrade, even if, as I say, it's pretty meaningless. But the major issue is going to be how will investors react to Italian and Spanish bond auctions over the next 3 weeks, 6 weeks, up until the year end. Are we going to need to see the ECB continually buying? You know, will investors get more confident? And we just don't know. But my guess is that the ECB is going to need to keep buying, and at some stage they're going to have to sort the situation out properly with the sovereigns and the banks.
And until then, are we going to see money pouring into treasuries? We have that record low for 2-year treasuries.
Well, money's just going to stay in safe havens. I don't think people are going to take too much in the way of risk, so money's going to stay in gilts, it's going to stay in bunds, it's going to stay in treasuries, short-dated. That's where it's going to be.
Gary, thank you so much. Gary Jenkins there.